Excellent. Councillor Garreth Bloor, welcome to your own event, Third Thursdays with Garreth Bloor. And if you'd like to open
Absolutely.
Our topic for this evening.
Well, thanks very much, and good evening, everyone, and of course to those who are watching. Technology has been a key part of how we live, and very often it's been seen as a sector. But I think what a lot of the companies demonstrate that are with us today is technology is more than just a subsector in the economy. It's probably a very key driver and innovator that is changing things around transportation, bookings, and a whole variety of industries. It's clear not a single one hasn't been left untouched. And for many of you here in the technology space who've been a part of that, an especially warm welcome. And for those partners who've been part of helping deliver the fantastic Treppy tours out into communities. I see the Hout Bay Partnership is with us tonight. All of you in civil society, a very big thank you for that outreach. And Judy, I don't know if I'm going to leave it up to you to start introducing the guests, but really we've got the local represented, a national company, and of course then one of the biggest global players that will be coming on stage in just a minute. But perhaps, Kobus, if you just want to brief us a little bit about what you're doing. It's a local company and it's really focusing on changing how we interact with basic municipal parking.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm from a company called SnapScan, and what we do is mobile payments. So we allow you to use your phone to pay for a variety of goods and services at any of the 22,000 merchants in the country where you can use the product. And we really got started by asking the question, and that is there are more than 1 million merchants out there, mostly small merchants who don't have access to formal payment facilities. They don't have access to a card machine or to any other way to accept payments other than cash. And we really try to apply technology to address that very specific problem.
Fantastic. And are there any particular reasons for starting out or being based here in Cape Town with the presence that you've got?
Yeah, absolutely. We actually started out in Stellenbosch, and the very simple reason for that is that it was a bunch of people that knew each other through the university. As it turns out, Cape Town is probably the best place to do a technology startup in South Africa. The infrastructure is great, the community is fantastic and supportive around that, the sort of tech community. So if I could pick anywhere in the country, I would pick Cape Town, and that's also why we relocated here.
Fantastic. And do you have any external investors at the moment? And when it comes to costs, do you think we are quite a competitive environment for a startup company?
It's an interesting question because it really depends on what industry you're in.
Right.
As far as starting a new company is concerned, Cape Town is awesome. Mostly because I think we can attract the really top talent. It has all of those characteristics that you get in San Francisco or in Barcelona or a whole bunch of other places where technology startups thrive, and it really has to do with quality of life. Sure. It's not a boring country. There are interesting things, real problems to solve, but at the same time, great technology, great infrastructure, and it's a nice place to live.
Absolutely. And I mean, certainly the most entrepreneurial city according to every metric in South Africa. And I think South Africa, a very entrepreneurial country. We often look at some of the metrics that measure the formal rate of business, but if you actually go into entrepreneurial activity that's not registered and you take samples, there's amazing talents. And I know the book How South Africa Works, which has been doing the rounds internationally with Greg Mills, actually lists that as one of the key assets that the country has in competing globally. So some very good trends to watch. Judy, I don't know if there's anything in particular you wanted to come in on, particularly with enterprise development.
Certainly, Kobus, as you say, there are a lot of small businesses and retailers who just don't have a card machine, and they also can't afford to pay those costs on their margins because their margins are so low anyway. And one of the things that I've noticed about SnapScan is that it just works so well with everything else that the city does. Right. So, for example, with all the races and the cycling and the sports events, etc., all I have to worry about is that I've got my phone with me, because I'm always going to have my phone with me. And I don't have to worry about, wow, I need to go and draw cash, or I need to have an ATM card, and all of that kind of thing. What it does is I can pay for things right here, right now, without having to plan in advance for it.
Absolutely. So let's look at one very local example, since we are in Cape Town. So one of the nice use cases there, I think, is paying for street parking. So
definitely.
The only other real alternative that you have is to use cash, and that's not a very convenient way to do a payment. So it's one small example, but whether it's a coffee shop or a large retailer or online payments, we basically saying that today new opportunities exist because technology is available, and we want to use those in ways that address very local problems. So yes, we absolutely, on the consumer side, the product makes sense in sort of larger retail, but where it really is a game changer is in opportunities where there are no efficient alternatives, and where we can sort of leapfrog ahead of the infrastructure that the rest of the world has developed over many years, and actually say, let's use the most cutting edge solutions for real problems today.
Definitely, because the thing is that what we found is that entrepreneurs, they will find a way to be enterprising. And the thing is that a business is only a business when it's got a customer and when they get paid. And so all the red tape, really, a lot of it goes away if they can at least get their money. And the informal sector, the informal trader sector in Cape Town is strong, it's well organized, it's well respected by the city. So, and your solution really directly supports those people.
Yeah, and I think what we're really trying to do is to blur that line between formal and informal business. Because at the end of the day, we're all people selling goods and services, and we want to get paid for doing that. And a lot of those distinctions made an enormous amount of sense in the 80s or in the 90s. But today we can really blur those lines and say it's about opportunity, and it's about actually getting out there and leveraging that opportunity.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
And I think, the way we address policy making from a government perspective has got to see that. The first thing is that we've quantified how much the informal economy adds to this city, 1.4 billion in terms of GDP, and amazing the activity that takes place that sustains families and that drives opportunity for people. But on the other hand, you've got the scenario where the attempt to create a paradigm that says informal versus formal leads to pressures and temptations by government to force people into formalization that can just actually end up excluding them. And I know we have a member of parliament today who's been very key here with us on the business licensing bill, saying, hold on a second, let's avoid that mistake and those unintended consequences. But in terms of leapfrogging, another very interesting point, it just came to my attention today. There are 4 billion people in the world using a cell phone. Only 3.5 billion people are using a toothbrush. You can see where priorities have gone. And I think that is significant. And it's another reason people justify the importance of access to the internet and bandwidth as much as they do to water, because it's how you interact and are not excluded from the economy at this point in time. Is there any particular aspect of your business that you think is sometimes misunderstood when it comes to mobile payments? And what would that be?
I think it's tricky because we are trying to do something that is really quite innovative and quite new. So our biggest challenge today is to essentially educate the general public in terms of what we do and how it applies to their daily life. But I think that's not unusual. That's the case for any new kind of business, any kind of innovative business. So really the biggest confusion that we see on a very practical level is that it only applies to some people, or perhaps because we have a partnership with Standard Bank, that it's only available for Standard Bank customers, those sort of tactical things.
Right.
But what we've really seen is that in South Africa, we have an enormous drive towards early adopters. We have a lot of people who are willing to experiment with technology and are quite innovative in the ways they apply it. When we set out to build a product, we had no idea it would be used in the way that it is used today.
Right.
Because people find all kinds of applications for the things we build, and I think that's really exciting for us.
Fantastic. And certainly a very competitive environment. What always impresses me about tech entrepreneurs is they're the last people I find who run to the government looking for subsidies. Incredibly amazing, 500 new apps added to the Windows store online every single day, and that number just seems to be increasing. So big congrats to you and to the work you've achieved so far. And I think some of the discussion we're going to have a bit later, also as we open up into the audience, may, I suspect, not really be as much about technology as certain sectors and industries and social issues which are being addressed through the sorts of innovations that you've got running.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much. And if that subsidies are offered, let us know.
We do have an open data portal, and there's a lot of opportunity on that as well. So I'd say check it out. But the next person that I want to bring on is somebody who's got a company now moving and represented nationally, and that is Andre Elis. So Andre, if you would come up, we're going to begin a little bit of discussion around your company and of course what it is that you've been achieving. So perhaps in terms of Price Check, one of the most successful apps on the continent, a little background as to how you got started.
Garreth, thank you very much, and good evening to everyone. Just a little bit of background. PriceCheck itself, a couple of years ago, probably about 5 or 6 years ago, was bought from an entrepreneur that started PriceCheck and got it going. There were 4 people in the company, and then Naspers bought PriceCheck out. I had just returned from Singapore, and then I was tasked to start or get PriceCheck going. There were 4 people in the company at the time. And we're now quite far down the road. Quite a lot of people. We're also based in Nigeria. We've got offices here. One of the top 5 visited e-commerce sites in Africa. So we're quite happy with where we've been going with it. We think people like it, and I'll touch on it just now. But we use SnapScan. We're experimenting with SnapScan in PriceCheck as well.
Amazing. Talk about your investors. I mean, we have got a significant investment community here in the Cape, and quite a link with the South African community in San Francisco. And just disclaimer, I was involved in fundraising with the company before I got into government, and my first round actually came in Silicon Valley. For you, how involved have your investors been in maybe not directing the company, but certainly opening up networks, helping with business development, or have they been more hands-off?
Garreth, just to clarify, I was with Naspers and then part of PriceCheck. So I didn't get investors. Naspers was the investor that bought it out.
Okay.
But yeah, so I was. I've been involved now. Taking a look. I've been in Silicon Valley twice this year, so you could gather the direction. But if you think about it from a Naspers point of view, the beauty about it is it allows a big corporate for you to access, in an entrepreneurial thinking,
right,
a vast amount of data and people and contacts from that point of view.
Fantastic. And I mean, what are one of the tips that you may have in terms of your experience so far with building a company? I mean, many people, once they reach that point of, all right, the money's in the bank, you've got staff, but there's the actual big road that lies ahead.
I was speaking to a bunch of guys the other day, and the beauty about Cape Town, and specifically my feeling about it, going to Silicon Valley, coming back, taking a look at where things are, is people coming from here are bright. We build spectacularly clever things. Yeah. I had the opportunity to speak to about 30 to 35 different venture capitalists and businesses in Silicon Valley early in the year, and meet with them over a week period. And really, guys, we build clever technology here. What the beauty is, and where we need to take a look at things, and this is a personal opinion, is to be able to take this and market it abroad. The big boys, Facebook, Apple, Google, are buying new companies every week. They're spending between $20 and $100 million every week to buy stuff to keep them relevant. I always smile and I think to myself, the top guy in Silicon Valley is a South African. And we mustn't forget that. You take a look at Silicon Valley recently, in the last 5 to 6 years, CEO of the year for 4 years in a row were all South Africans. And I only realized this after the 5th year that it was somebody else. Because guys are making tremendous, and the inner city or the Cape Town itself has this fantastic platform. Sure. We're like Silicon Valley from the point of view that you've got Techno Park next to Stellenbosch. So you've got these brain powers that are building things that allow then, and Cape Town itself sets the platform to be able to have entrepreneurs build things, but build it on an international arena. We must always remember we've now got access to everything. We've got access to Uber, we've got access to mobile payments, and we're streets ahead of anybody else. We're going to rewrite mobile payments and payments across the world.
Fantastic. And I mean, anything that you think could bring the success that's been achieved in Silicon Valley closer to South Africans who are in South Africa, perhaps are finding it better to build their base from within Cape Town than, let's say, to shift operations over on that side?
Invest back in South Africa.
Excellent.
Yeah, and that's the thing that Silicon Valley does. Those guys give back. That's come back and they give advice and they help and they assist. And that's the one thing that we still need.
Absolutely. And I think we're seeing some movement towards that. The Sable Accelerator in San Francisco is comprised just of South Africans who are looking at how to do that. Yeah. And of course, bringing in people who are passionate too about the country and who's seeing the opportunity that lies here.
There was an article today somewhere, I think in VentureBurn, that the VC market in South Africa is now nearly 2 billion rand.
Yeah, it's incredible.
Yeah.
Incredible. And I must just say, as I sort of take a broader view from an economic perspective, I've seen in the last couple of months Israeli entities and agencies trying to attract South Africans, as well as European family offices saying, where can we get in on some co-investment? So it's some interesting times ahead.
Laugh a lot.
Finally, I want to bring in a global player now, and we're going to get some background there from Uber and go into, I think, some really fantastic discussion. But Jonathan Ayashi, if you would come and take the floor, it's very good to see you. Really, I think there's little introduction that can be given to Uber, and so I try not to be like a regular politician and give one. I'm going to say, Jonathan, go ahead and
right.
speak to us. And maybe if we can just start, tell us a little bit about how Uber landed in South Africa and in Cape Town specifically, because you've gone global, and I know every new market has been a different experience. So what makes us interesting?
Well, I think, Cape Town is a very interesting market in South Africa, as a whole is. And when I joined, my journey began in Cape Town, and a friend of a friend contacted me and said, have you heard of Uber? They're looking at opening up in Cape Town. And I hadn't heard of them. Immediately went home to look it up, and I suppose that's where the journey began for me. And we've been really humbled at the take-up in Cape Town and South Africa as a whole. So it's been a wild ride from our first days in a tiny office in the Woodstock Exchange to our new offices and the success we've had to date.
Excellent. And how, in terms of your operations here, how much scope, I suppose, for independence do you have, and versus your relationship and direct line to your HQ back in the States?
The Uber philosophy is to hire local teams so that we can connect with the city. There's no better person to know how to run the operation in the city than a local. And obviously we get support from our international counterparts, but we run the city ourselves. Yeah.
Excellent. Excellent. Judy, do you have any? I know you want to perhaps ask a specific question before we go to the floor.
Certainly, and then yes, I've got a question for Jonathan, but then also I'd like to also come back to Andre a little bit and after that. And I have to say, from my own perspective, I use Uber quite a lot, and I've found that what it does, it's really decreased the mileage that I have on my car. I'm quite astounded, because the thing is, I moved from Johannesburg almost 2 years ago, and the mileage I'm doing here is considerably less, because the thing is, I use whatever transport mechanism is fit for purpose. So yes, I've really enjoyed Uber. And also the thing is that it's one of those things that I use anyway, whether I'm in London or I'm somewhere in the US, I use Uber, and I've got the app and it comes off my credit card. I don't have to arrive in a different city and then download another app and do a whole new thing. I'm not great at that kind of thing. If I've got an app on my phone, now that's the app I want to use. I don't want to download anything else. So it's really nice the way it's been integrated with the scale, starting off with the scale in mind to get it right. And how have you felt, being a Cape Townian and suddenly, being brought into this massive organization, this global organization with all this scale and all this might and this huge brand? It must have been fascinating for you.
Very exciting, and I feel privileged to have been a part of building this in Cape Town. Right. In the beginning, obviously it was much smaller, but I've subsequently sold my car, and I can't imagine owning a car in Cape Town and getting around. Particularly, on the job creation front, I actually got in the car the other day with one of our earliest partners, and who actually started out driving for someone else, and he told me that he's just received his second license from the city, and he's interviewing 3 new people, and he's going to be purchasing another car and putting it on the system. So seeing that growth and developing those relationships with our partner drivers, that for me has been really special.
Excellent. Fabulous. So I just wanted to ask Andre something, and that is, what I find very fascinating is that you've been with Naspers for some years, and then you took over this business, which was a fabulous innovation and startup from 4 entrepreneurs who maybe weren't particularly good business people, and they could get it going, but they couldn't lift it to the point it needed to be lifted to. what it's reminded me of is this whole thing around entrepreneurship in large organizations. And I don't know if you want to just have your view as a corporate person on the role of innovation and entrepreneurship being so important.
Yeah, an interesting aspect around that, and you bring it up, entrepreneurship. Naspers per se in its culture is an entrepreneurial business. The beauty is they've been able to allow us to run and build these things as entrepreneurs, to build new technology, to make things happen, and really to take a small little idea and build it into a big stuff. But it's all in your own hands.
Yes.
So you've got to be able to do it. The facilities are given, but if you don't produce, then they shut it down.
Of course.
But if you do, then it's allowed to fly. And in a big corporate, sometimes people get stuck in red tape, and they get stuck in the day-to-day situation. We have so much entrepreneurial development in this country, and specifically in Cape Town. So for a corporate to be able to get more involved in that, not a lot, just allow people just a little bit of a freedom to be able to fly, use the small business to be able to grow businesses, helps them to pop out and come through. You take a look at some of the things that are being built in Silicon Valley. It's because the big corporates use them from an early point on.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, great. And now, I want to go back to Jonathan. Jonathan, in a way, I want to link back to what you were saying about your engaging with one of your earliest partners who's now expanding his own little business. So what you've got is you've actually got, in a way, a collection of very, very small micro enterprises, one-man bands or sole proprietorships that are all moving together. And so you've been able to give people the freedom of having their own business, but also the luxury of the scale of a large organization. And maybe if you just want to expand a little bit on that.
There are very few opportunities that you can walk into with little to no risk and immediately from day one start making money and start building your business. And I think that's one of the big things that we've given to people, is that ability to take that entrepreneurial spirit and go and run with it. And it's really exciting. And I mean, to date, we've created 2,000 job opportunities in South Africa, and over the next 2 years, our goal is another 15,000. So we're well on our way to achieving that.
Interesting add-on to that is that from taking small businesses and helping them.
Yes.
This is what the price check platform also does.
True.
So with this
Absolutely.
big portal that people can find, but everybody finds a business inside of it, and that so to get back to your answer, how do you help somebody small grow, is to be able to use this like they do. And then now we're using SnapScan that we're adding into it, because mobile is so powerful. Now somebody can find a product on our platform and then use a payment app to be able to to pay for it.
Yes.
And then we use a delivery method to get the product to you.
Well, certainly, and yes, because the thing is, and I think that's also what we're seeing here is a lot of convergence.
Yeah.
Sorry, that's a very techie term I learned from somebody, convergence. You want technologies to converge. So we're not all in our different silos, but it's a great example of such convergence.
As an entrepreneur, the amount of stuff that's available to start a business and get something going. There's so much available, so many things that you can say, plug that in, plug that in, plug that in. I can take my idea from A to Z, and most of the stuff inside I don't have to build anymore.
Right. But it's incredible. I think it comes down to the impact that we're seeing now with convergence, dare I say, and the inherent good that that's doing in delivering opportunities in turn for other companies who really taken advantage in building on these platforms. And I think perhaps people wondered, well, look, with your tech lineup tonight, usually you focus on business development, and that kind of assumes you've got developmental agencies. But I think we can see that technology is changing that paradigm quite significantly. So congratulations to each one of you. You're now getting the real hot seat, the questions that we have not censored.
Yes. That's right. I was just wondering who would like to ask a question. Toby, if you wouldn't mind standing up and giving Bjarke an opportunity to put your name up.
Oh, right. Thank you. Hi, everybody. I think on Tuesday I was at a conference in Joburg and we met Alon Litz, who was giving a presentation on Uber. Phenomenal story, but I mean, one of the things that struck me was he says that there are restaurants in New York now that are actually closing down their shop front and just having a kitchen.
Apparently, they can't hear you.
Oh, sorry. So New York restaurants are now closing down their shop fronts and just having a kitchen and using Uber as a delivery service, and it actually makes more money than running a restaurant.
Incredible.
But just a question for you three guys. Did you take part in the PwC Tech Startup Survey?
Yes.
You did? Yeah. Jonathan?
I didn't.
Okay. Because very interesting stats, you know, pointing out what you were saying, Garreth. The tech businesses generally don't look...
Sorry, Kirby.
Yes?
I'm being very rude, but this thing's not on.
Okay. Do I have to start again?
Please start again.
Should we get the other microphone? Is it on now,
It's
do you
on
think?
now.
All right, I'll forget about the New York story, but I just want to ask, so the three of you, or two of you took part in the PwC survey. So did you, I would like to ask you, did you look for finance from banks when you started up? You obviously didn't because you were part of NASPERS, but did you, Cobus?
Short answer, no. I'll maybe expand on that a little bit. So how we operate is we're a group of companies called FireID, and we actually, through business that we've done, have accumulated some funds and use that as a private VC or a private seed fund to start new businesses. So we're all internal and self-funded, and I think our model, and that's perhaps an interesting contrast with sort of the Silicon Valley model, our model is one that is purposefully built to be capital efficient. So we give businesses 6 months, and by that time you need to be at break even and generating revenue. So it's put certain limitations on you. It means there are certain kinds of businesses that you can't build that way. You need significant capital to build some kind of businesses. But in South Africa, the terms on which you get funding for very early stage businesses are quite different from the terms on which you get them in Silicon Valley. So we also have an office there, and the game that we play there is a very different one from the one we do in South Africa.
So just one final question. What do you think are the main constraints for startups in this country to get off the ground and grow? And what can government do to remove those constraints?
So on my side, there are three. The first one is, as far as government is concerned and national government is concerned, one of the very key challenges is a combination of intellectual property law and exchange control regulations. So it sounds horrible because the plan certainly isn't to move value out of South Africa. But it means that if I go to Silicon Valley and I ask American companies to give us a lot of money that isn't available in South Africa, you're playing against other people without these restrictions, which means you essentially don't play. So that's the one. The second one that's really hard for us is attracting good people. Not because there aren't good people, there are amazing South Africans who are extremely talented and competent. But our biggest competition in Cape Town is a whole variety of large international firms who've set up shop either to get good people for very low rates here, or alternatively who have just got recruitment offices here. Half the people I studied with at university have moved because they're getting offered 5 or 10 times more to work in Silicon Valley for a big name company. So that's tricky. It's not an unsolvable problem, but it is a tricky one. And the third one is really that I think, and this is a mistake we've made before, but I think we've learned from, is that a lot of people try to build companies that look like US companies, try to use the recipe that works in other areas. And I think that's a big mistake. So market size or total addressable market is a challenge. South Africa has 50 million people in it, but that doesn't mean there are 50 million people whose first priority is to get a new iPhone app. There are a lot of more pressing concerns. So if you build a South African company, realize you're in South Africa and use those opportunities. Address real challenges that matter here. And those would be my three. Sorry, it's a bit of a long answer.
Thank you.
Fantastic.
If you wouldn't
That
mind
is Toby
introducing
Chance, Member of
yourself.
Parliament, so we might hear you quoted in his speech tomorrow. But welcome.
Evening. I'm Ricky Pato. I have a question for Cobus, and it's around the whole issue of crime. I mean, over the past few months, Cape Town have been highlighted recently as like one of the major cities at the moment in South Africa when it comes to fraud with bank cards cloning and all of that stuff. How is this safe?
So, I mean, there are a lot of technical answers, and we can have a long conversation around that, but actually that's what we've seen as one of the big advantages of this product, is that you no longer, and I mean, very similar to apps like Uber as well, you no longer need to hand over your credit card to somebody to do a transaction. So when you buy something from a shop that accepts SnapScan, we never hand them your payment details at all. We just hand them the money. And I think there's more and more of that happening, where we're saying it's actually a little bit crazy if you think about the concept of a credit card, right? It's a piece of plastic with 16 digits on it that you need to keep secret at all costs, and at the same time carry with you wherever you go and hand to strangers all over the place. So it made a lot of sense in the 80s, not that much anymore today. So today I think technology allows us to solve problems in new ways, using your phone that you always have with you, that's safe and secure, secured with a fingerprint or with a PIN code. So technically we can solve that security problem. And on the flip side, you don't need to carry around a large amount of cash, which can also be a dangerous thing to do.
Great. There you go.
Hello, I'm Terry Murphy, and I wear a number of hats, but the hat I actually want to use right now is a sort of a plug hat. And I want you to know that we're launching an e-commerce Africa forum in 2 weeks' time in Joburg and in Cape Town. And I hope that you'd be interested in attending the launch briefings. So I just want you to know about that, because we want to address some of the issues that you've brought up, training and so forth. I have several questions. On Uber, I'm interested to know, are you considering online retail distribution via Uber? I mean, it's a big issue for the online people, is how to get the goods to the customer, to his home. Are you considering using the Uber system for that?
So overseas, a product does exist called Uber Rush, which is essentially using the Uber platform as a courier service. We'd love to launch that in South Africa. Unfortunately, there are no timelines on that, but as soon as we can, we will look to doing that.
Okay, well, we at the e-commerce forum would be interested in debating that with you. I think that would be an interesting move. And then another question I want to ask you, please. In the townships, what's your experience of the Uber service in the townships?
So the average ETA, or estimated time of arrival, that's how long it takes an Uber to get to you, is in Cape Town is around 3.5 minutes, and that's across Cape Town. So sometimes it'll take a little bit longer, sometimes it won't. But it's been really interesting to see how it's grown, not just in the CBD and surrounds, but also in previously underserved communities like your townships. It is growing there. Obviously, I mean, not as fast as other areas maybe, but certainly growing.
That's interesting. And then I wanted to just sort of address the issue you brought up about the cashless society. And I happen to know about this situation with the spazas, where, as you know, they've been subject to a lot of allegedly xenophobic attacks. They're not xenophobic attacks at all. They're simply after the cash that's in the shops. And I know there's a big test going on by a company called My Wallet right now to try and avoid cash transactions with the spazas. I'm interested in your comments on that.
It's an enormous problem, and that's it's interestingly enough not isolated into areas without infrastructure. Cash handling generally is a really hard problem. Very expensive to handle cash, very insecure. We're seeing large companies like Coca-Cola and SAB and milk delivery companies having some serious challenges in terms of just selling stock to shops, spaza shops for example, and collecting that cash, and how you do that in a safe way. So South Africa, I think, is really at the forefront of working on that problem. There are more than 20 companies that I know of working specifically on that problem, of saying, how do we get essentially business-to-business payments done without cash, because that's where large amounts are moving. And there are billions of rands a year already moving through these cashless systems. The reality is, however, that cash is not something that's going to disappear overnight. So it is always going to be a combination. It's going to be cash displacement, which is removing cash wherever you can. But then there are also sort of more innovative technology solutions for just making cash safer, whether those are drop safes, electronic drop safes, whether it is sort of distribution centers where you can go buy your cash goods. So I think a lot of people are working on it, but it's an unsolved problem. It's a very hard one.
Thank you very much.
Great, thank you too. Are there any other questions? Right, okay.
Fantastic.
Garreth, back to you.
All right. Well, I wanted to ask in particular, if you look at people who talk about tech companies that are leading to disruptions that exacerbate inequality, which is a big discussion you may not hear in the business world, but I think in society overall, it's becoming increasingly raised. I mean, how do you see, your companies are doing it, but how do you see your companies actually bridging that? Because you're giving people access to markets. And maybe for each one of you in your respective 3 companies, what is the number where you wake up and you say, we're actually changing the world, we're not exacerbating the divide. How do we're helping bring people together and we're helping lift all boats.
Garreth, do you mind if I use a really practical example?
Absolutely.
We've just finished, and we've just, it'll go to market any moment now, but we've just finished building an app that allows anybody, and I was using this example recently, that somebody that has a table under a tree at the foothills of Kilimanjaro can use the app, take 10 pictures of his product. It creates a catalog that appears on price check. It's then geolocated, so we call it the Uberification of shopping. Why the Uberification of shopping? Because I know where the client is, it's geolocated him, and then I know where the people are that are looking for him. So within 20 kilometers, I will show anybody where that catalog is. So I'm not going to show the catalog to the guy in Joburg or the guy in Cape Town. I'm going to show it to the guy that's close to him. And that allows, that crosses that bridge. So I can now take, and we use this example in Computer Village in Nigeria. In Lagos, Computer Village is like just a bunch of shacks, but hundreds of them that sell computers and phones. To be able to track that guy and to show him that from that, his address is number 13597 Ikubu Road. You're never going to find him. But with a mobile phone and a smartphone, I can suddenly tell you, or with a pin drop, this is how you'll find him. Now I give him a technology that he doesn't need to print a catalog. He just takes pictures with his phone. It creates, so that type of thinking, to be able to use the smartphone, and you can create a catalog, or you can create something to be able to find someone. Then you use a smartphone to use cash and take cash out of the picture. Now suddenly the guy can pay for a product under a tree on the foothills of Kilimanjaro, and just by using a smartphone. And that excites me. And the dynamic about Africa and that crosses the bridge of inequality much more than anything else that's international.
Absolutely. Kobus, you answered that question in part, but maybe if there's anything you want to add with your offering.
I'll just make one note, and that's the really exciting thing for me is I suspect all 3 of these companies essentially address this problem without setting out to build a company to address a problem of inequality. It's a good business proposition. So I think that's what makes technology really exciting, is that we can still do normal for-profit business with a sound business model, and there can be benefits for society. Absolutely. You don't need to start a charity. Not that there's anything wrong with doing an NGO or a charity at all. It's an incredibly important part of civil society, but it is very encouraging, I think, when market mechanisms can be used in that context, and generally people win from it.
Absolutely. And a great book out. I mean, if anyone's interested in this subject, it's so South African in its context. Anne Bernstein from Johannesburg wrote The Case for Business in Developing Economies, and it won a very big award 2 years ago. It's an easy read, but I think a very inspiring read for anyone who says, hold on a second, I'm in business, what am I doing for society? The ways your business is impacting on a daily basis is phenomenal, as you say. Jonathan?
As Kobus said, I think the great thing is that it's actually as a byproduct that we're able to do this. In South Africa, one of the things that we found when we entered the market is not everyone has that access to capital to necessarily go out and buy the car, even though they want to join the platform. So, I mean, we've already got some financing schemes in place, and I'm very excited, but I'm not allowed to say anything. We've got a big announcement coming out very soon. So watch this space. But it's
Chomping at
it's
the bit.
really it's really for us. I mean, we like to use the word, but game changer. So, but beyond that, I think just the way that we've been able to educate partners on from day one using smartphones.
Sure.
We forget, I mean, 2 years down the line, you forget how 2 years ago people didn't have smartphones the way they do today. So even as small as that, the change we've been able to make with our driver partners.
Fantastic. Thanks very much. We've got one more hand that I saw went up.
See if it's working. Yeah, otherwise I get into serious trouble from Carla. There you go. Please introduce yourself. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Evans, and I'm the editor of Fast Company South Africa magazine. I've got 3 questions, 2 for you, Jonathan, and 1 for all of you. We recently interviewed Alan Litz, and I asked him a few questions, which he answered very well. But I forgot to ask 2 things, so I'm going to ask you.
Okay.
So the one question is more on the franchising side. I asked them about franchising, and he was a bit brief on it. So can you tell me why it is that you guys don't consider having franchisees in different cities, especially considering that in Africa, you actually have presence in about 6 cities. So it could be more, obviously. But you say that you wouldn't consider that, and there's new competition coming up. So why is that? And then the second question is more on the legislation side, because cars are getting impounded, and I also talked to some of the drivers, and so I talked to the different sides. And the one thing is that when they impound the cars, you guys always help, and they're very happy about that. But what's the plan? How long will this continue? What do you foresee happening? Is there a need for legislation to be pushed? I mean, obviously with disruptive technology, it's always the technology that pushes the legislation. But in this particular instance, considering that there's a lot of pressure from different groups, what's the plan? Then the last question for all of you is more on regulation. So who actually says this is what's supposed to happen? Say things go wrong. Who are in the virtual world, things don't work out. Who kind of regulates your industry besides the government? Because we're in a global economy, especially with apps and stuff. So who regulates that?
Oh, great. Thanks.
I'll try and tackle my 2 questions. Look, I don't really have a good answer for the franchising. It's just the way the business model works is we set up teams in every city, and that's how we roll out. Maybe someone else will have a better answer than I will. In terms of the regulatory side, look, there have been challenges, but I think that we've made great strides with the city. I mean, we're sitting here today. We're very encouraged. We're very encouraged at the progress that we made and for the future of Uber in Cape Town and South Africa.
And I have to say on that point, very often entrepreneurs do have legitimate gripes and complaints, but it's not always often that translates into an actual submission, even a one-pager that says, government, this is the problem, here's how we'd like you to fix it. And so I know Uber's focused quite a lot on policy by necessity, but really that's what it comes down to. The other thing that I think is important too is you have one sphere of government that maybe will allocate licenses, but the number of licenses they can allocate are determined by another. And so that whole question of the 3 spheres of government, I know it was not just us you had a little bit of engagement with, but you succeeded. And I think that's very encouraging. You succeeded in an environment where I think a lot of people would say, oh, that's government. What can you do? Government is just that way. So sorry, I just wanted to put that out there because I know 1 or 2 of you have actually done the same thing, and the results have been good so far.
No, it's good.
Fantastic.
We're very excited.
Perfect.
So if you're in payments, you're actually a compliance company that occasionally moves money around. So it's a tough one. So we're regulated by basically anyone that can think of regulating anything. And on a literally weekly basis, I get angry phone calls asking me about whether we're complying with X or Y, only to learn about it for the first time because they wrote the rule the previous week. So, but I don't think that's unique. I think if you're working in sort of innovation and disruptive stuff, you are always going to be the problem child who doesn't fit in the regulatory framework, where there is no category that applies to you, and where with a lack of a category for you, everyone applies their rules to you. So it's challenging, but I don't think there's any point about complaining around that. That's the nature of what you do. So I think you're naive if you think that piece is admin or that piece is restriction. It is part of doing business. If you don't like the rules, then get involved with the structures that there are and change them. It takes a lot of time and effort, but that's the way the world works. So you have to invest, you have to be responsible, and at the end of the day, a sizable chunk, at least 40% of those regulations are a really good idea. And they do protect people. I think the biggest frustration, and that's not a South African thing, it's certainly not a Cape Town thing, is the speed with which the legislative process happens is problematic. I mean, from concept to the first people using our product was 11 days. To get a new piece of legislation through all the processes, I have no idea how long that takes, but a very long time. So those things there's a tension there, but I suspect the whole world needs to deal with how we get those processes faster.
Yeah.
Just to add to that, touch on e-commerce, not a very regulated area, but from a price check point of view, what we did is, because we're kind of the gateway, we have a trusted store criteria that people have to go through. And we watch very closely. So we take a look at, we've taken that on ourselves to make sure that everybody that we list, the 1,000-odd stores that are featured there, have to go through a trusted source scenario. And regardless of how big you are, one of our criteria is that for you to become trusted, you've got to be with us for 6 months. So we can see how you react, how people react, how the comments are come back. So regardless of how big you are, if it's one of the bigger retailers or one of the small guys, they all go through the same criteria. So you can't buy a trusted scenario. So from that point of view, we had to take it on ourselves to make sure that people trust us and we're objective enough. And that, I think, is one of the big things why we've been successful. People know when they come to us, they get what they're looking for. Okay.
Fantastic.
Councillor Bloor, we've got more questions.
Happening.
If that's all right.
Hi, I'm Janine. I have a question for Jonathan from Uber and Kobus from SnapScan. So my question to you, Jonathan, is there space for a competitor in Cape Town? And for yourself, there are a lot of online fraud, numerous stats. So what has been your experience and how do you prevent those? Thanks.
Look, I think that we're for competition in the industry, and I just think we want to be one of the options that's available, whether it's the My City or the train or another taxi or a competitor that does more similar to what we do. We just want to be one of the players and be allowed to operate in the city.
Yeah, online fraud is a significant problem, right? The reality is it's not nearly as bad as people think. Cash fraud is a lot worse. But it is probably the number one thing we care about, just slightly more important than compliance. But it really is. So technologically, luckily, we can solve an enormous amount of these challenges. So one of the reasons why online fraud is so prevalent is because the reality of how these transactions happen hasn't caught up with the technology. So in the past year, online fraud in South Africa has declined significantly with the introduction of technologies like 3D Secure, for example, where you get a little SMS message that you need to type in. So with that, online fraud has reduced very significantly, but the reality is it then moves into a different area. So now it moves to somebody skimming your card at a fuel station, for example, which is currently a very big challenge. So it is a little bit of a game of sort of whack-a-mole. You have to invent a way to solve that specific challenge, and the fraudsters will think of the next mechanism. But in general, if you look at how safe and secure your funds are online, and the kind of protections that you have, it compares to absolutely nothing else that's out there. If somebody clones your card today, you're insured against that, and you'll lodge that with the bank and they'll repay your money if you weren't irresponsible in the way you reacted. Whereas if somebody steals your wallet today, that cash is gone. So the systems really are catching up with that, but it's a constant battle. And I think what makes it different is you're not only competing with the people who break your window and steal your wallet, but you're competing with everyone with access to computer all over the world that's trying to attack you. And I think a lot of South African companies really have a lot of work to do to get up to scratch in terms of that. And it's a constant battle.
Hello, I'm Ashley Newell from the Hout Bay Partnership. And this conversation's been interesting for me because I'm actually from Silicon Valley. And there's been a lot of conversation about the talent that is here in South Africa. And with the Hout Bay Partnership, we just partnered with Up for All to bring their coding program into Hout Bay, and have found that there's great energy of people excited to break into this field and the opportunities that exist. So I just wanted to ask the panel what you think of education, and somebody like myself that's grown up in the tech environment, you know, for the next generation of South Africans, what opportunities do you think you can encourage and open for them?
Fantastic. And then this was a big question at the World Economic Forum as well, who made that exact same observation. Yes, this is quite a big one. Thanks, Ashley.
Yeah, it's an interesting question that, and you know, slight off the area specifically that we're in, but there's an interesting crowd in Johannesburg that call themselves We Love Code, and they're bringing out an academy where it's irrelevant what your past education is, but if you can solve spatial problems and that type of stuff, they will pay for your coding for a whole year. They've got big backers right now, and there's fantastic stuff happening. You see it all across Africa. The guys have been brought up with entrepreneurial ways of doing things. South Africans, well, Africans per se, always have to think on their feet. If they don't have a roof over their heads, they don't eat. It's not like the rest of the world where you can fall back on something. So the opportunities that are opened up for people to start to learn to code, one has to push that as much as possible. If there's one thing that I would do is try and get as amazing, forget the guy's education, just teach him to code. You give a bunch of kids there's an experiment or something that they did, they gave a tablet to a bunch of kids where they deactivated the camera, but they didn't tell them that they did that. 2 weeks later, they found a way around how to get the thing working. You give people stuff to do and they will find a way around it. Same goes for coding. And you know, it's not difficult to do if you can think that way. The guys are building stuff around Africa that's spectacular.
Yeah, for me it's interesting. I used to be a university lecturer for 5.5 years. So it's interesting moving from that sort of view on education to one where it's sort of about practical skills more than anything else. And I think my conclusion is twofold. The one is that where we need to put our energy is really in basic education. It is about the kind of things that you can't teach yourself. So I had the ability to teach myself a whole bunch of skills because I was fortunate enough to have a really good school education that gave me that start, right? So I think if I could do anything, that's where I would put energy. But on the actual training side of it, the miraculous thing here is that none of the people that we employ got any of their technical skills in a formal training program. They just needed to be at a point where and have access to a level that they could teach themselves. Now, this sounds a little bit conflicted, but it isn't easy to teach yourself. You need a bunch of base skills. So once you've done university, it's super easy to teach yourself a whole bunch of things. Or once you've gone to a good high school, for example, you can teach yourself things. So we need to give people that ability to educate themselves, and then the resources are amazing. I quite recently, on a very technical field, didn't know how it worked, and the way I solved that was by quickly watching a video from one of the top universities in the world where I could sit in 3 or 4 of those lectures in the afternoon, and then I had that knowledge. The technology is available to do that with, but you can only watch those videos and internalize it if you have those base problem-solving skills and learning skills.
This is definitely something that we're in favor of. Recently we had a partnership with Codex where they brought youths from underprivileged areas in Cape Town, and we set the challenge of developing a queuing system specific for us. So it was very relevant, and they spent 2 days. First day was coming up with a concept and the product, and the second day was coding, and then they presented that to us. And just to your point, what I went down on the second day, and one of the participants asked me a question about neural networks, and I had absolutely no idea what he was talking about, and asked him, where did you hear this? And he said to me he'd been doing online courses and learnt it there. So again, something that we're definitely in favor of, and we actively promote.
Brilliant.
Got another question here, Garreth.
Vaughan Harris, Director of the BIM Institute. Just a question to three of you, as three successful entrepreneurs. For an entrepreneur starting out his new business who believes he has a product and maybe fits in with the tech of the industry or wherever he's going, such as an app, what is the message or the advice you would give that entrepreneur to go to the market, and how does he expose his product to the market, using your experience and to where you got to in the past?
Well, the beauty about Cape Town right now, and I'm going to use that as an example, is network. There's spectacular stuff happening. Silicon Cape, this type of stuff. We are truly in a position where guys can get out there and talk to people. I have a bunch of entrepreneurs that come to me with really clever apps. There's one I recently saw that gets me excited. It wakes me up at 3 o'clock in the morning. And there's tremendous amount of scope for it, and there's also access to money, there's access to facilities, everything is there, but you've got to get out and network, and the network is truly available around here.
So I think the short of it is just do it. I mean, it sounds sort of flippant, but it isn't at all. The idea is really not that important at all. We all have really great ideas all the time. You have several good ones every week. It doesn't mean that much. It is about finding, I suspect, exactly those sort of resources that you need. So get the guts together to build a first product that isn't shiny, and find some people who care about it. And once you've done that and got some momentum, find other people that'll join your mission, that'll work with you on it, get a good team, and then the resources are available. I mean, you can find the initial funding, you can certainly find the support. There are a whole bunch of people in Cape Town that'll be happy to talk to you and put their time into giving back in that way. But at the end of the day, if you come talk to me about your idea, I'm not going to take that meeting. Come show me something you've built and some people using it, then we can have coffee. Otherwise, sorry.
For me, I had the privilege of walking into something, and I didn't start it. We had some backing behind us. But a tip that I would give is just pull in people around you that are good. We always try and hire people that are smarter than us. Whenever we interview, if someone is smarter than me, we'll bring them on, and it happens often.
Garreth,
Fantastic.
if I can also come in here and want to respond to your question. Yes, I agree. It's about getting out there, and you'll be absolutely amazed, because everybody who you come across, and if you have got that quick and dirty working prototype, people will want you to succeed. And even if they can't help you themselves, you will be on their mind constantly, and they will be thinking all the time, who can I introduce Vaughan to so that he can actually take it further and to take it further. That is one thing, is that certainly within the city and on our continent, we really want to see other people succeed. We don't have a mentality of, oh, that's a great idea, why didn't I have it, and therefore I'm not going to help you. Not at all. It's all about, wow, that's incredible, and how can I help this person get it off the ground, even if they're complete strangers. We want to see people succeed. So yes, it's about getting out there, and the more people you show it to, the more you're going to succeed. It's a numbers game.
Absolutely. And on that point of networking, I think, Judy, you're alluding to the end of the live broadcast now, but for those of you who are here, certainly the start of a great networking session. And I like to put people on the spot, so I see some people here. I've identified the Member of Parliament. I'm going to identify Lo Barnard, who just got named the youngest ever top 35 CA in the country, building a company now, I think, up to 19 people. And I happened to meet you 2 years ago when you were at 1 or 2. So congratulations, and the list goes on, and Thompson and everyone else. But I think that is key. You know, I know it's a cliche, your network determines your net worth, but just on balance of probability, the ability to get that support and to connect with someone and land an idea is just so much higher. And finally, to the three of you who are here, Jonathan, Kobus, and of course Andre, for the fantastic work you do in just driving growth and innovation, making Cape Town what it is. A very big thank you from all of us. It really is great to meet people like yourselves on a daily basis here in the city. And for people who are watching, of course, I know the number details will come up, but we have MEDO, who are an excellent partner, one of 90 organizations we get to work with in helping refer entrepreneurs and businesses to support agencies. And of course, if there's a problem you have with the city, let us know. Contact us. You've seen what proactive...
Phone Judy.
Phone Judy, either. That's always good.
You know.
As long as Judy doesn't stand for election, that's fine. But
no, I'm too busy, Garreth.
But in essence, it's about actually finding those solutions. And you know, let me just say in closing, it's not about just helping you comply with bad legislation. You've got to cut that legislation. And certainly in the city, on those areas of the economy where we do have a constitutional mandate, we've cut over 300 old policies and plans and the like. And really, it's been amazing in the sectors it's impacted. We saw a 46% growth in just one of them. So thanks for leading the way. Thanks for speaking out where necessary. And thanks to each one of you for your passion and for all that I know the city's going to achieve going forward. We can't do it without you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Garreth. Well done.
Thank you. Brilliant.